Welcome to Ask Leo Answercast number 143. I'm Leo Notenboom, and I'll be answering questions that people are asking out at AskLeo.com. Today's Answercast is brought to you by the Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance. I want you to keep your computer running better and longer. And that's why I wrote the Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance. Culled from the articles on Ask Leo, it'll help you speed up your computer, free up space, and avoid spending money that you don't need to spend by making that machine last as long as possible. The Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance can be purchased in either of three formats: a downloadable PDF, a Kindle book, or as a paperback from Amazon. Regardless of which one you choose, once you register your book, using the link inside of the book, you'll be able to download the same book in any or all of the digital formats. Also, once you register your book, you'll get access to companion videos that demonstrate the various steps that I've outlined in the book. You know, I see people discarding computers way too early, and it just doesn't have to be that way, especially when the problem that they're trying to solve isn't the computer itself, but the software that's running on it. The Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance can help. Visit askleo.com/guide to learn more and purchase your copy today. Leo, I have an old desktop using XP. If I disconnect it from the internet, could I just use it for games and storing pictures? Thanks. A lot of people are wanting to extend the life of their Windows XP machines. What you're suggesting, well, it's not unreasonable, but I actually have questions about whether or not it's going to be useful. A machine that's not connected to a network and never makes contact, direct or indirect, with another computer is actually quite safe. There's actually no way that malware can make its way onto that machine. Unfortunately, my way of thinking anyway, that machine's not particularly useful either. It's limited to what's on the machine, no more and no less. So, for example, playing games? Sure, as long as you never want to put a new game on it. As long as you never expect to do any online gaming. As long as the games themselves never expect to connect to the internet. It'll be a fine, dedicated gaming machine. Storing pictures? Sure, as long as you never add any more pictures to it. It's a fine machine for viewing the pictures that are already stored on it. The problem, of course, is that putting more pictures onto the machine means that, by definition, it will come into indirect contact with other computers. Do you download your pictures from your phone onto the machine? Well, you could get some malware that way. Do you copy the pictures on a USB drive and then copy them onto that machine? USB drives are definitely one way that malware has been known to spread. And if you connect it up to a network, even just a local network, you've got all the same vulnerabilities from the other computers that are connected to your network as well. Basically, any approach that's going to make that machine useful by adding more pictures, for example, potentially violates the very security that you're trying to achieve by making it an unconnected, dedicated device. It'll probably work, but it's possible, if you want to make the machine useful, that you'll still end up being at risk. My recommendation? Just don't fool yourself into thinking that it's safe. Either keep doing all the things you know you should be doing already to keep your computer safe, connected or not, single function or not, or change the operating system. Update to something that's supported, be it Windows or Linux. My biggest concern here is the false sense of security, and that once you find out just how limited a disconnected machine really is, the steps you might take next will render it somehow vulnerable. I'm experiencing a strange quirk using one of my programs. At times of intense calculations, the program itself stops responding, yet my PC remains perfectly usable. I've looked into the Resource Manager and I noticed that at these times the program is using exactly 25% of the available processor power. That figure is constant until the program unfreezes. My processor has 4 cores, and all are available. The program is allowed to use all the cores, though none of them are registering high usage at the time the program freezes, other than the one. Do you have any idea why this might be happening, and possibly a way to get the program to use the rest of the resources that it has available to it? I experience almost the exact same thing from time to time. I, too, have a quad-core machine, and occasionally it'll be running at exactly 25% CPU usage, as only one of the cores is maxed out by some program that I'm running. But I know why. Unfortunately, the bottom line here is that there's really no simple switch to throw that'll force a program to use more cores. Software, as it turns out, actually has to be written to use multiple cores. The software has to figure out how to best to divide up the work that it's doing, because only that software, or its authors, know if what it's doing even can be broken up. Multiple cores means that the CPU can actually do, quite literally, more than one thing at a time. But not all problems or calculations can actually be constructed in a way that allows them to be solved or processed that way. Sometimes it's a linear, one CPU kind of a thing. It's kind of like driving to the grocery store. Having 2 cars isn't going to help you get there any faster. In fact, there's no way that 2 cars could get a single person from point A to point B any faster than a single car, assuming, of course, both cars are the same. Obviously, if you have 8 people that need to go and each car only holds 4, then the 2 cars can make sense. However, you need to have 2 cars, i.e. multiple processors, and the people need to be instructed to take both. Otherwise, they just use the first car and take twice as long. In other words, the program needs to know to use multiple CPUs. Now, I can't know what the limitations are of the program that you're using. However, I'm convinced that it's either of 2 things. The processing that it's doing is CPU intensive, of course, but can actually only be done one step after the other using a single CPU. The other approach, or the other alternative, is that perhaps the software has simply not been modified or written to take advantage of more than one CPU. This is typically true of older software. Absolutely, that does not mean that multiple cores are a waste. As you've seen, the program can hang completely, and yet your machine remains completely usable, thanks to having more than one core. We often run more than one program. Even if each one uses only a single core, they can run side by side. And there's a lot of software that actually does take advantage of multiple cores. In particular, my next machine is going to have 12 cores because the video processing software that I'll be using knows exactly what to do with that. Hi Leo, surely you get asked this many times a day. I'm using Windows Vista 32-bit presently, and I want to move to a new Windows 7 or possibly Windows 8 64-bit desktop computer. I back up to an external USB hard drive. What is the best way to migrate so as not to lose my emails, bookmarks, and so forth? Is it possible to migrate straight from the external hard drive to the new 64-bit OS? I know not all things are compatible between 32 and 64-bit, but I'm just wanting to make this as seamless as I can. Thanks in advance for your help. Unfortunately, seamless is a word that I'm really reluctant to use when moving to a new machine. We can move most of what you want, but the steps to do so aren't what I'd call seamless. Migrating straight from the external hard drive isn't really an option. Unfortunately, that's not really what backups are for. Yes, you may be able to use your backups for part of what will come next, but once again, seamless it ain't. Particularly since you're going from 32 to 64-bit, after getting your new Windows up and running, step 1 is going to be reinstalling all of the applications you care about. Now, some will be the same version, but some will be new 64-bit versions. In all cases, though, these are new installs from scratch, from the original download or from the original installation media. Next, you'll move your data. Now, without knowing the email program you use, it's difficult to say exactly what steps you're going to need to take. If you're using the same email program on both the old and the new systems, it's typically, though not always, just a matter of copying the appropriate files or folders to the appropriate location on the new machine, and then possibly tweaking a setting or opening a file. If you're using a different email program, perhaps when people move from Outlook Express to something newer, then things absolutely get more difficult, as you'll have to both move and convert. Bookmarks, address books, and other kinds of customizations are typically moved by exporting them to a file on the old machine and then importing them into the new machine into the equivalent application. But this doesn't always work, as not all programs support import and export. Then you're faced with simply rebuilding your customizations, or at least the ones that matter, again, from scratch. Other data files, like documents and pictures and the like, you can simply copy from one machine to another. And this is also where the backup can sometimes come in handy. Since those types of files are not impacted by the operating system change, they can be recovered from the backup image or copies. The problem is that switching to a new machine with a new operating system, with a new processor type, is actually a pretty big deal and has ramifications for almost all of your installed software. The result is that that move is rarely seamless. Sorry. What is the current status of a company that wants to offer security protection for your credit card purchase and your identity? Is it Target initiated? Target, of course, is the company whose security was breached recently in a fairly massive theft of account information from their customers. Unfortunately, this gets really complicated really quickly. Compromised companies, like Target, try to do the right thing for their customers. But of course, there's always somebody who wants to come along and take further advantage of the situation. So like I mentioned, I'm using Target here, a retail chain in the United States, as my example. This actually happened to them in the 2013 holiday season. Their point-of-sale terminals apparently were somehow hacked, and customer credit card information, sometimes quite complete, was actually stolen and then resold or reused by hackers. There have been other companies who've suffered similar issues since then, but like I said, I'll probably keep referring to Target as the canonical example today. So the scenario is like this. Target had their database hacked, or their point-of-sale terminal hacked, or something got hacked. Some large number of customer records were copied. This information included a combination of things like credit card numbers, perhaps even PINs, addresses, names, and much more. So now hackers have some millions of credit card numbers that they can then go out and start using. Or, as is more typically the case, the hackers actually start selling these credit card numbers to others who then in turn use them and rack up fraudulent charges. Target did the wrong thing, of course, in not being secure and allowing the breach in the first place. However, they're doing the right thing by actually offering at least a year of free credit monitoring from one of the larger credit bureaus. So they contact all of their customers who've been affected with this offer. Now, I don't know if they do paper or email, but I believe they do some kind of combination thereof. And, as I said, all's well and good so far. Target's doing the right thing, trying to recover from this breach. Now, hackers come along. What do? Well, they send out spam that looks like it came from Target, claims that your card was part of the breach, makes you an offer for credit monitoring, directs you to a website to sign up, where this sign up requires your personal information, perhaps your social security number. The problem is that this is spam, or more accurately, it's a phishing attack based on the news, and that sign-up site, it's completely bogus. Rather than protecting you, you've just given away your personal information to a hacker. So, there are legitimate emails from Target with a legitimate offer. But there are also bogus emails from phishing hackers that look like they're from Target but are not. How do you tell the difference? Well, this is one of those cases where you never, ever click on links in the email. It's just too risky. If the email contains a link that looks like it's on the company's corporate domain, for example, target.com, then instead of clicking, or even instead of copy-pasting, just type that URL into your browser. If you're not certain, just go to the corporate domain yourself, target.com in this case, typing it in, and look for information about the breach. If you're still not certain, well, go to the corporate website, again, type it in by hand, and look for the customer service numbers or contact information and initiate a conversation that way. Unfortunately, it's just too risky to actually click on the links in the email that looks like it's from the affected company. Ultimately, yes, I do believe that it's probably worth taking that extra protection if you know that your credit card was in fact one of the ones that was compromised during the breach. But it's critical that you don't get fooled in the process. Hi, Leo. If I'm sure that a hacker is controlling my computer, and I was online in my Skype account in a video call to a friend, could hackers then see and save a video message during the recording? In other words, can a hacker see my screen and record my video call with my friends and show our faces at the same time? While this does seem like a very specific scenario and a very specific concern, I want to address it because it's a fine example of something that a lot of people just don't seem to realize. Something that's very important about the nature of hacks, hacking, malware, and compromised machines. To directly answer your question, yes, absolutely. If your machine has been hacked into or is compromised in some way, that a hacker could certainly record your Skype video calls. But the problem here is that it's much, much worse than that. There's an old adage that I think people need to hear more often. Once there's malware on your machine, it's not your machine anymore. Or if you like different terminology, once your machine has been hacked, it's not your machine anymore. The bottom line is that once your machine has been compromised, a hacker can do anything. And by anything, I mean, well, anything. It can record your video, your audio, your keystrokes, your mouse movements, your screen, your anything. He can copy your data, your history, your programs, your files, your emails, your pictures, your anything. He can use your computer to send spam or hack other computers or spread malware or hide his location or do anything. And if they're any good as a hacker, they can do most all of what I've just described without you noticing. So as soon as you say, if I'm sure that a hacker is controlling my computer, without going any further, I can tell you, you're screwed. It's not your computer anymore. The hacker can do anything he wants with it. That's why people like me harp so hard on staying safe in the first place. That's why we want you to keep your system up to date, run anti-malware scans, and so on. And above all, learn what it means to stay safe. Avoid downloading and installing stuff you don't need. Don't believe everything that's emailed to you. Don't open attachments that you aren't 100% certain of. Whatever it is, if you're not sure, just don't. This is all stuff you already know, or should already know. The key is remembering it, making it a habit. I know that it sounds overwhelming, but it's completely doable, and really, honest, it doesn't have to be a huge imposition. Just like there are rules to driving a car safely, once you get them memorized, they become second nature as soon as you pull out of the driveway. Working to make the internet safety second nature, and you won't have to worry about whether or not your video chat is being recorded. When shutting down or restarting my computer, it freezes in the shutdown process, and then I get the blue screen of death. It's been happening a lot more lately. I took pictures of it with my iPhone to see what it says, but it's too much to write out. But there's something in there about a driver. Blue screens can absolutely happen for a variety of reasons. These days, driver issues are probably number one on that list, as are problems at shutdown. First, it's an excellent idea to take a picture of the blue screen. It's a good way to get the information to someone who can help, or just to have available for looking at later as you're researching the problem yourself. What I would start with is trying to identify the driver that's involved. That's most likely going to be based on the file name of the file that was hopefully referenced in the blue screen. Googling that actually would be my first inclination if it's not obvious from the name. Hopefully that will at least lead you to the specific hardware that's involved in this problem. First, make sure that the hardware itself is working properly. Hardware failures, particularly intermittent failures, often manifest as blue screens. The hardware does something that it's never supposed to do, and the software, the driver, it gets confused. Drivers will often handle those kind of failures less than gracefully, to put it politely, which really means they're going to blue screen. If the hardware isn't being used and it's removable, I'd be really tempted to take it out, at least for a while. That way you can see if the problem goes with it. Next, I'd make sure you have the latest drivers for that hardware. If it's an add-on component, that means going to the manufacturer's website for the latest drivers. If it's a basic system component, I'd check next with the computer manufacturer itself. And finally, I'd make absolutely certain that Windows itself was up to date and that any possibly optional driver updates offered by Windows Update were also installed. If all that fails, well, at that point I'd probably find a good technician. There's a small possibility that it's a software issue and that a reinstall of Windows would actually fix it, but I'll reiterate that it's a small possibility. And of course, if it is in fact a hardware problem, a reinstall isn't going to help you at all. Finally, I'm assuming you already thought of this, but if you changed or added hardware lately, that's always very high on the suspect list. And there we go. I do the Ask Leo Answercast every week. So if you've got a question about your computer, the internet, technology, head on out to AskLeo.com to search for an answer or ask your question. You might hear it answered here in a future Answercast. I also put out a newsletter every week. The Ask Leo newsletter includes answers and fixes and safety tips and opinions and even the occasional answers to just why things are the way they are. Please back up. I plug this every week because it is so incredibly important. Nothing can save you from almost any disaster like a proper and recent backup. I just can't stress that enough. All of my answers are based on my own personal experience and should be used entirely at your own risk. I don't know you, your abilities, or the specifics of your machine, and those details can make a huge difference. The Ask Leo Answercast is a production of Ask Leo and is copyright 2014. Thanks for listening. I'm Leo Notenboom, and I'll be back soon with another Ask Leo Answercast.